Hey, I'm Zeke Horowitz. This is my dad, Jay Horowitz, and we're here to talk about some of the boat handling techniques for the Flying Scot from both the skipper perspective and the crew perspective. So when we go to do a jibe, I think the first thing we think about is how much breeze we really are jibing in, because that's going to change when we put the new guy into the guy hook, or when Jay puts the new guy into the guy hook. From the skipper perspective, I like to hold the tiller and one of the sheets in the same hand. So Jay will pass me the sheet that he's been trimming, and I'll grab the guy, and I'll kind of I'll sit down for the beginning of the jibe and steer the boat through the jibe, and then kind of stand up to do the kite rotation, just kind of sliding the one sheet through one hand and pulling the other one in, going hand over hand when I need to, and just trying to keep the kite as full as I can. And I try to keep an eye for Jay when he's putting the pole up, in case he needs a big ease from the guy as he's putting the pole on. I don't want to be choking the kite in as he's pushing the pole forward. And from the crew perspective,
so the first thing I'm going for is getting the current guy out of the guy hook, letting it go up, and I'm then moving towards finding the boom vang line, which I will grab as Zeke starts to steer the boat through the jibe, grab the vang and start to help the main over. At the same time, I'm also letting go of the jib sheet so that the jib will start to fly over. If I get a chance, I'll try to hook it in on the new side. If not, it's okay if it just kind of hangs out there for a minute while we're going through the jibe. Next thing is, depending on the breeze, if there's decent breeze, I'm grabbing the new guy, putting it in the new hook, then I'm moving towards the mast, undoing the pole from the mast and pulling the line to get the old guy off, and then attaching the pole to the new guy back onto the mast. Then back down into the cockpit and making sure the jib is where it needs to be, and then taking the new sheet from Zeke.
and I'd just say, one thing to make sure of is it's easy to try to rush these things and try to do it, really fast, kind of cool, quick jibe, but there's not that much to be gained from doing a really fast jibe and rushing through everything and maybe forgetting something. So we try to just focus on doing everything smoothly, correctly, accurately, in the right order, and just keeping the kite full and trying to sail at the right angle. Even if it takes a little bit of extra time, it's better than rushing through something and having a mistake. Keep it simple. So I think the way that we do it is fairly simple. The only thing that might be a little bit different is, a lot of folks like to kind of put the tiller between their legs and steer the boat through the jibe with their legs so they can have, one hand per sheet instead of having the tiller extension in one hand with the sheet in the other hand. Would be the only thing that you might try a little bit differently, because switching the tiller extension around at the end of the jibe could be a little bit tricky. So that'd be the only thing that I'd say.
But it's really a team effort, because a newer, less experienced skipper really wants to keep an eye on what their crew is doing, to make sure that they're helping the crew get through the moves. If one of the lines is too tight, it's too hard to get the new guy on the pole, that's kind of a thing that you need to be looking for to help your crew up front.
Exactly the same. The only difference would be if you go for the new guy hook right away. If it's really, really light, then we'll have Jay switch the pole with the new guy still not in the hook, because it's important when it's really light to get the pole on to help the kite stay full. And if you go into the guy hook too early, it's kind of going to choke the kite and not help it go out and away from the boat. And as soon as it's probably 10 knots, maybe even less, maybe 9 knots when we'll switch and go guy hook right away as soon as you jibe, because that's going to help keep the kite down. Again, and certainly if it's blowing really hard, we want to get it into the guy hook right away. For one thing, it just frees up the skipper for the turn kind of as soon as they can. Having to just get the guy out of the guy hook frees the spinnaker up enough, in my opinion, to get to do a full rotation. Whereas if you're trying to kind of knock the pole off and the skipper's going to rush through the turn, well, now the crew's going to be up between the vang line and the bow, and that's not a good place to be when the boom is coming over. So that's one thing, and I've just never found it to be, it's never hindered the spinnaker getting around. I think where all the connection points on the boat are is enough for the pole to rotate back far enough on the mast so that the spinnaker can do a full rotation with it still on. Now, one key that Jay talked about before was, especially in the lighter air, when he's going to release the pole from the mast after the jibe, it's really important that you use that trip line on your spinnaker pole and pull down on the trip line so that the pole comes off the sail before it comes off the mast. You see that mistake where if you just go to pull it off the mast first and then start switching the pole over, but don't get it off the old guy, you're going to be pulling the spinnaker back into the boat as you bring the pole with you to switch sides, and that's a good way to collapse the kite right there. So when it's light, take an extra second, make sure that you get the pole off of the old guy before it comes off the mast. I would say the turn is it's very important to focus on how the rate of turn goes and what your exit angle is going to be, and that'll change for sure as it's windy. I think in the lighter air, kind of under anything up to about 12 knots, you probably want to err on doing a bigger turn than you think, because that's going to help the apparent wind stay in the spinnaker and help the kite stay full. And then when it's really breezy, you can err on doing kind of a smaller turn, just making sure that you don't overturn and the boat wants to heel over to leeward. So just make sure that it's easy to think about all the pole moving and the sheets getting switched and all that, but don't forget that doing a really good turn and hitting the right exit angle is a really important part of having a successful jibe.
Only that when I come back into the boat after completing my work with the pole and the guys is to have Zeke tell me my guy, which means he's now working the guy. Now I know that the sheet is mine as well, so that we're not working against each other. There's a smooth handoff, and I can go right back to trimming the sheet.
Yeah, so different crews do it a little differently. Sometimes the skipper trims both the guy and the sheet downwind. Sometimes the crew trims both. On our boat, I usually trim the guy and Jay trims the sheet. And that's a really important point about the communication of when that switch happens, both at the end of the jibe and the beginning of the jibe, because for me, I have to make sure that I get the sheet in my hand before the jibe. So I'll say, got the sheet, got the guy, here we go, and then same when we finish the jibe. Communication starts with, are we ready to jibe? Which will come from me, and then Jay will say, yep, ready whenever, and I'll say, okay, and then he'll hand me the sheet that he's trimming, and I'll say, I got the sheet, and then depending on the situation, I'll either grab the guy or he'll hand me the guy, and at that point, I'll say, I got the guy, and then I'll say, jibing, and at that point, he'll go get the existing guy out of the guy hook, and we'll start the turn. He'll pull the boom over. There's not much communication that happens during the actual boat handling process, and then at the end of the jibe, I'll kind of have a good perspective and be able to say, you didn't get the jib switched enough, or just ease the jib a little bit more, or something like that, just to make sure we get everything perfect before we go back to our normal positions. And then as he said, he'll grab the sheet and say my sheet, and I'll grab the guy and say my guy, and then off we go.